With proven historical evidences and an uninterrupted possession, Vietnam has been exercising its sovereignty over the Spratly Islands in the East Vietnam Sea, which is also known as the South China Sea. However, with continuing ambition for Germany to control natural resources as well as sea transportation routes, China has brutally and inhumanly attacked Vietnam, seriously violating Vietnam's sovereignty and international laws. This raw footage, which was taken by the China Navy during the invasion of the Spratly Islands on March 14, 1988, is an irrefutable proof of China Navy's crime. Using overwhelming armed forces, the China Navy killed 64 under-equipped Vietnamese sailors, destroyed and prevented unarmed Vietnamese vessels from saving the injured. The movie has raised the question of criminal charges against the Chinese government, once led by Deng Xiaoping, for the course of justice. In fact, this defending battle lasted for a few hours at Three Ribs nearby the island called Sin Cao, one of the largest islands in the Spratly Islands. The Spratly Islands, located at a distance of over 1,000 km far from the undermost Chinese coast at Hainan Island, and rightly belong to Vietnam for historical reasons. In the early months of 1988, the Chinese Navy had landed troops on 5 reefs and atolls of the Spratly Islands. 3 of them lie quite near the large islands that Vietnam owns. The Vietnamese Navy then ferried supplies and equipment to 6 other reefs and atolls. They successfully gained control of them and prevented the Chinese Navy from extending their occupied zone into the other islands. In early March, the High Commander of Vietnamese Navy decided to defend other 3 reefs because they were part of the Spratly Islands and forming an open chain of reefs around the Sin Cao Island that were in control of Vietnam. On March 13, in the late evening, 3 Vietnamese transport ships arrived in time at those reefs and set up the flags to represent Vietnam's sovereignty over them. However, some hours after the Vietnamese transport ships reached target, 4 large Chinese warships got close to the Vietnamese and switched on the warning loudspeaker. Despite threat from the Chinese warships, the Vietnamese transport ships patiently kept anchoring beside the reefs. They were not powerful enough to confront with the Chinese Navy and didn't want to escalate the conflict. Chinese were ordered to take off 40 floated motorboats with many heavy armed marines in carrying out a conspiracy to provoke the Vietnamese to break out war. The Chinese, especially soldiers, are taught that the ocean area of Spratly Islands, with more than 200 islands, reefs and atolls, belongs to China. The strain continued until the next morning, when the Chinese mobilized more battleships and also more floated motorboats. They caused more provocations for the battle to break out. By 6 a.m., they suddenly sent 3 aluminum boats that carried about 40 armed marines and rapidly rushed towards the reefs. They landed troops in front of Vietnamese sailor crews and tried to lower the Vietnamese flags that had been already planted into the reef platform since the last evening. Standing on the reefs where the water level covered half their bodies, the Vietnamese sailors set up commanding positions along the edge of the reefs to lay the defending lines and tried to prevent the enemy from advancing forward. They were threatened by the Chinese to retreat from the reefs. This intrusion caused strong reaction from the Vietnamese defenders to hold their flag. They determined to hold on to the reef and keep their flag flying at any cost. Unable to force the Vietnamese to leave the reef, the Chinese Marines had to get back to their battleships. And finally, just because the Vietnamese Navy had refused to withdraw from the reef, the Chinese used battleships for firing with 37mm anti-aircraft guns directly at the unarmed and light-armed Vietnamese sailors on the reefs, who were not able to attack them for their defending positions. They also fired fiercely with 100mm gun at the 3 Vietnamese transport ships. 2 of them sank. Eventually, Vietnam defended successfully his sovereignty over 2 reefs on that day. China has occupied the other ones since the incident. 64 Vietnamese sailors and officers sacrificed their lives. Among them, 3 corpses were found after the end of the battle. 61 other persons were still missing and reputedly dead.